In the harsh borderlands of 1870s Arizona territory, Shadow Wolf moves like a phantom through the twilight. His reputation as the most feared Apache warrior precedes him. 20 years of raids have left settlers speaking his name in whispers. But on this evening, something unexpected pierces the desert silence. A woman's voice, singing an ancient prayer that echoes off canyon walls. For a warrior raised on legends of blood and vengeance, this sound should mean nothing, yet something. In her melody reaches past his hardened exterior, awakening memories of his grandmother's songs from before the wars began. As he stands transfixed, spear lowered, a question burns in his mind. Could the path of peace hold more power than the way of the warrior? Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The weight of the medicine pouch at Shadow Wolf's hip seemed heavier now than it had in years. His grandmother's final gift, worn smooth by 2 decades of warfare, contained sacred herbs that had long since lost their fragrance. Yet on this night, as the woman's song faded into desert whispers, their scent suddenly returned to him: sage, cedar, and something sweeter that spoke of peaceful mornings by the cooking fire. He remembered the day his grandmother had pressed the leather pouch into his small hands. "Some warriors," she had said, her eyes dark with wisdom, "carry their strength in their weapons, but true power lies in knowing when to set them down." At 8 winters old, he hadn't understood. By 18, he had forgotten. Now, at 38, her words echoed with new meaning. Shadow Wolf's fingers traced the intricate beadwork on the pouch, patterns that told stories of harmony between earth and sky, between man and spirit. His grandmother had been the tribe's most respected medicine woman, keeper of songs that could heal both body and soul. But those were different times before the blue-coated soldiers pushed deeper into Apache lands, before raids became a way of survival rather than choice. The transformation from small deer, the boy who gathered healing herbs with his grandmother, to Shadow Wolf had been gradual, then sudden. His father's death during a soldier's attack had sparked the change. The tribal elders saw his rage, his skill with bow and spear, and nodded in approval. This was what their people needed: warriors who could strike fear into settler hearts, who could protect what remained of their lands and ways. He excelled in the warrior's path. Under the guidance of Red Horse, the tribe's most experienced fighter, Shadow Wolf learned to move without sound, to read trails 3 days old, to strike with the precision of a rattlesnake and the force of a mountain lion. His grandmother watched the change in silence, continuing to fill his medicine pouch with healing herbs, even as he filled his quiver with arrows. "Remember," she would say, pressing fresh sage into the pouch, "every warrior carries 2 hearts. One beats for battle, the other for peace. The strongest know which to listen to." He had dismissed her words as the soft wisdom of women, unnecessary for the hard path ahead. Yet she persisted, adding new herbs each season, until her passing 5 winters ago. Now, in the deepening twilight, Shadow Wolf withdrew a sprig of dried sage from the pouch. Its scent mingled with the lingering echoes of the woman's song. He had been tracking her for 3 days, watching as she tended her small garden, carried water from the stream, and sang to the setting sun. His warriors waited in the hills above, expecting him to signal the raid that would drive another settler from Apache lands. Instead, he found himself remembering how his grandmother would sing to the dawn, her voice carrying healing to all who listened. This settler woman's song held the same power, not a settler's hymn of conquest, but something older, an earth prayer that could have come from his grandmother's own lips. Red Horse would call it weakness, this hesitation. 20 years of successful raids had earned Shadow Wolf his place as war leader. His name brought fear to settler camps and pride to his people. Yet here he stood, fragments of his grandmother's wisdom rising like morning mist in his mind, her medicine pouch suddenly alive again with possibility. The scattered herbs in the pouch had once been for healing wounds, easing pain, calming troubled spirits. Shadow Wolf had carried them through countless battles as a link to his grandmother's memory, but had never used them. Perhaps that had been their true purpose all along, not to heal others, but to wait until he himself needed healing from the warrior's path. As darkness settled over the canyon, Shadow Wolf carefully rewrapped the sage and returned it to the pouch. Tomorrow would bring decisions that could reshape everything he had become. But for now, he simply listened to the night winds, wondering if they carried his grandmother's songs among their whispers. Sarah Thompson knelt in her small garden as the evening sun painted the canyon walls gold. Between rows of struggling corn and beans, she carefully pressed another desert flower into her father's Bible. Desert marigold, its yellow petals still bright despite the harsh afternoon heat. The leather-bound book, worn smooth by 3 generations of hands, had become both family history and botanical record of her new home. "See, Father," she whispered, closing the Bible gently, "your desert blooms, just as you said it would." 2 years had passed since his death, since she'd chosen to remain on their homestead alone rather than return east to her sister's comfortable Philadelphia home. The other settlers called her stubborn, foolish, even touched by sun fever, but they didn't understand the promise she'd made. The Bible's pages were thick with pressed flowers now, each one labeled in her careful hand: Sacred Datura, Devil's Claw, Indian Paintbrush. Her father had taught her their names, both the settlers' terms and those he'd learned from the native peoples during his years as a frontier doctor. Every plant has its purpose, he'd say, just as every soul has its path. She rose slowly, brushing dust from her skirts. The evening ritual called to her now, the moment when the day's heat began to fade, and the canyon walls seemed to lean in close, waiting. Sarah lifted her voice in the ancient song her father had taught her, learned from an old Apache medicine woman who had once saved his life with desert herbs and wisdom. The melody rose pure and clear in the evening air, words in a language she didn't fully understand but felt deep in her bones. It was a prayer for healing, for harmony between earth and sky, between all peoples who walked beneath them. Her father had sung it during his final days, delirious with fever, speaking of debts unpaid and bridges yet to be built. Other settlers avoided her valley now, unsettled by her solitary ways and strange songs. Only Samuel Martinez, who ran supplies from Tucson, still made regular visits. Last week he'd warned her again about Apache raids in the region, about a fearsome warrior called Shadow Wolf who left no settlers alive. "A woman alone," he'd said, shaking his head. "It ain't natural, ain't safe." But Sarah felt anything but alone. The desert spoke to her through 1,000 small voices: the morning dove's call, the rustle of cottonwood leaves, the distant cry of hawks riding thermal winds. And in the evening, when she sang her father's song, the very rocks seemed to sing, with her, carrying the melody up into darkening sky. She tucked the Bible under her arm, its pages swollen with flowers and memories. Inside the small cabin, she placed it carefully beside her father's medical bag, leather cracked but still filled with strange-smelling powders and tinctures, tools of healing from 2 worlds waiting to be used again. Some nights, she dreamed, of continuing his work, of learning to bridge the divide between settler and native ways, as he had tried to do. The light was failing now, but Sarah lingered in her doorway, watching shadows lengthen across her small farm. Tomorrow would bring another day of hard work, hauling water, tending crops, repairing endless wind damage to the cabin's roof. But these moments, when she sang to the setting sun, made every burden worthwhile. This was her father's dream, and now it was hers, to create something here that spoke of peace rather than conquest, of healing rather than harm. She didn't see the dark figure watching from the canyon rim above, didn't know that her song had already begun building that bridge, one note at a time. Dawn found Shadow Wolf perched high among the red rocks, watching as Sarah emerged from her cabin with a large clay water jar balanced on her hip. The vessel's design caught his eye. Though clearly made by settler hands, its patterns echoed the ancient symbols of his people. Flowing lines like water, spirals like wind, dots like rain. On thirsty soil, she moved with surprising grace for a settler, her feet finding secure paths down the steep trail to the stream. Most whites crashed through the desert like wounded buffalo, but this one, she stepped as if the earth itself was sacred. At the water's edge, she knelt and dipped the jar with practiced ease, humming softly, fragments of last night's song floating up through the morning mist. Shadow Wolf's hand tightened on his spear, then deliberately relaxed. 3 times now he had watched this morning ritual. 3 times he had reminded himself of his duty to the tribe. The raiders waited in the hills behind him, growing restless. With each passing day, "The woman lives alone," Red Horse had argued. "An easy target. Why do you delay?" But there was nothing easy about Sarah Thompson. Shadow Wolf had seen too much these past days. Seen how she spoke to her plants as she watered them, using old Apache words that stirred memories of his grandmother's garden. Seen how she treated a wounded coyote pup, singing healing songs as she splintered its leg. Seen how she pressed flowers into that thick book of hers, marking each one with both settler names and what sounded like attempts at Apache terms. The morning sun caught the water jar as she lifted it, now full and heavy. Light danced across its surface, transforming simple clay into something almost alive. Shadow Wolf remembered helping his grandmother make such jars, learning the patience needed to work the clay, to paint the symbols that would bless the water it carried. This settler woman's jar spoke of the same respect, the same understanding that water was life itself in this harsh land. She paused halfway up the trail, setting the jar down to rest. Her breath came quick, but she showed no frustration, no anger at the daily burden. Instead, she turned to face the rising sun, and once again her voice rose in that haunting song. Shadow Wolf found himself mouthing the words along with her, ancient Apache phrases, asking blessing from the 4 directions, from earth and sky, from all that moved between them. How did she know these songs? Who had taught her the old ways? The questions burned in his mind, even as his warrior's training warned against such dangerous curiosity. He had killed settlers before, men who desecrated sacred sites, who shot Apache children for sport, who saw his people as animals to be driven out or destroyed. But this woman, she sang to the same spirits, walked with the same reverence, carried water in vessels that honored the old ways. The sound of approaching horses broke his reverie. Sarah quickly lifted her jar and hurried toward her cabin as 2 riders appeared in the valley below. Shadow Wolf recognized them, Samuel Martinez and his son, supply runners from Tucson. He had raided their wagons twice in the past year, but left them alive, respecting their fair trading with both settlers and Apaches. Samuel dismounted, calling out to Sarah in Spanish mixed with English. She emerged from her cabin, water jar now safely stored, and greeted them warmly. Their voices carried up to Shadow Wolf's position, warnings about Apache raids, offers to escort her to the safety of Tucson, gentle suggestions that a woman alone was tempting fate. Sarah's response was firm, respectful, but unwavering. This was her home now, her father's dream. She would not abandon it. The water jar sat just inside her doorway, its symbols catching the morning light, a silent testament to her determination to bridge 2 worlds, even if she stood alone. As the traders reluctantly departed, Shadow Wolf found his grandmother's medicine pouch heavy against his chest. 2 paths stretched before him now, as different as war and peace, as life and death. And somehow, a settler woman's clay water jar had become the mirror in which he must finally see his own true face. Red Horse's arrow lay across his bow, moonlight glinting off its obsidian tip. "Brother," he whispered, "you have watched this woman for 5 days now. The others grow restless. Tonight, we strike." Around them, 12 warriors crouched in the darkness, weapons ready, faces painted for raid and glory. Shadow Wolf held up, his hand feeling the weight of 20 years of brotherhood heavy in his voice. The woman knows our ways. She tends the earth with respect, speaks words of the old ones. He drew an arrow from his own quiver, running his fingers along its shaft. Each groove and feather was perfectly aligned, a weapon meant for killing, not for mercy. Since when does Shadow Wolf hesitate? Red Horse's words carried a sharp edge. Did she not steal this land from our people? Does her cabin not stand on the path our fathers walked? The other warriors murmured in agreement, their bodies tensing. For action. In the valley below, Sarah's evening song drifted up through the darkness. The words were clearer now to Shadow Wolf's ears, a prayer for healing between peoples, for peace in troubled times. He recognized phrases his grandmother had spoken, wisdom passed down through generations of medicine women. This settler sang them with the same reverence, the same deep understanding. "Listen," Shadow Wolf commanded softly. The warriors fell silent, the song filling the night air. Red Horse's face remained hard, but others showed confusion, recognition. These were sacred words, not meant for settler tongues. Yet here they were, rising pure and true from the valley below. Shadow Wolf stood, decision crystallizing like morning. Frost. In one swift motion, he snapped his arrow in half, the crack echoing against canyon walls. "This woman is under my protection." The broken arrow gleamed in his hands, no longer a weapon, but a symbol of choice. Red Horse rose to face him, disbelief and anger warring in his expression. "Have you lost your warrior's heart, become weak like a woman?" Behind him, the raiders shifted uneasily, caught between loyalty to their war chief and respect for Shadow Wolf's legendary status. "True strength," Shadow Wolf replied, remembering his grandmother's words, "lies in knowing when not to strike." He let the broken arrow fall to the earth between them. "There is killing that brings honor, and killing that brings shame. This would bring shame." "And what of our people's shame?" Red Horse demanded. "What of our children who go hungry because settlers take more land each season? Will your mercy feed them?" His arrow remained pointed at the cabin below, where Sarah had appeared in her doorway, unaware of the drama unfolding in the darkness above. Shadow Wolf's hand moved to his grandmother's medicine pouch. "I have raided at your side for 20 years, brother, spilled blood without hesitation when our cause was just. But this," he gestured toward Sarah's small homestead, "this is different. She walks between worlds as my grandmother did, as the ancient ones did before the time of war." The tension stretched like a bowstring drawn too tight. Shadow Wolf knew that his next words would either break it or release an arrow's flight. "There are other settlers within a day's ride, those who destroy sacred places, who kill for pleasure. Let us turn our weapons there, where justice demands blood." Several warriors nodded slowly, remembering specific outrages that called for vengeance. Red Horse's bow lowered gradually, though his eyes remained hard. "You risk everything for this woman, your place among us, your honor as a warrior." "Perhaps," Shadow Wolf agreed, "or perhaps I remember what we once were. Not just warriors, but keepers of balance, protectors of harmony." He picked up the broken arrow, holding the pieces out to Red Horse. "Choose, brother. Follow me to worthier battles, or strike alone tonight and make me your enemy." Seconds stretched into eternities. Below, Sarah's song faded into evening silence, unaware that her life hung on the decision of two men who had fought side by side since boyhood. Finally, Red Horse took the broken arrow pieces, studying them in the moonlight. "The others speak. True," he said at last. "You have changed, Shadow Wolf." He tucked the arrow fragments into his belt. "We will find other raids, other battles. But know this, if your trust in this woman proves false, if any harm comes to our people through her, my arrow will fly true." Shadow Wolf inclined his head, accepting both the warning and the implicit support. As the raiders melted away into the darkness, he remained, watching Sarah's cabin until her lamp was extinguished. The broken arrow had marked a path from which there could be no return, a warrior's choice to protect rather than destroy, to remember older truths than those written in blood. The wind changed first. Sarah felt it in her bones before she saw the approaching wall of dust, a giant copper-colored beast rising from the western desert. Her father had taught her to read these signs, the sudden stillness of birds, the electric tension in the air, the way shadows disappeared as the sun turned blood-red behind the rising storm. "Grandfather Wind comes to test us," she whispered in broken Apache, hurriedly gathering her drying herbs. The storm shelter, a deep cave her father had discovered and expanded, waited a quarter-mile up the canyon. Already, the first hot gusts were pulling at her skirts, carrying stinging particles of sand. Shadow Wolf saw her struggling against the wind from his watching place. The storm's severity concerned him. This was no ordinary dust devil, but a monster that could bury a horse. He had already waited too long, debating intervention. Now, watching Sarah stumble on the path toward the cave, he made his decision. She saw him emerge from the swirling dust like a spirit, tall and imposing in traditional warrior dress. Their eyes met for the first time, hers widening in recognition of who he must be, his dark and unreadable. For a heartbeat they stood, frozen in the growing storm. "The cave," Sarah said in halting Apache, fighting to keep her voice steady. "There is shelter." She pointed up the path, then took a step backward, uncertain whether this legendary warrior had come to help or harm. Shadow Wolf's response surprised them both. "Your accent is terrible," he said in perfect English, the ghost of a smile touching his lips. Then he grabbed her arm and pulled her toward the cave as the full force of the storm struck. They reached the shelter moments before visibility disappeared completely. The cave entrance, reinforced with timber supports, led to a deeper chamber where Sarah's father had stored emergency supplies. A stone fire pit dominated the center, with dried wood stacked nearby. Shadow Wolf surveyed the space with warrior's eyes, noting exits, supplies, defensive positions. But it was the walls that held his attention longest. They were covered with ancient pictographs, sacred symbols of his people's earliest ancestors. "Your father chose this place well," he said, watching Sarah light a small fire. "These marks are older than the oldest songs." Sarah nodded, arranging her rescued herbs near the flames to keep them from dampening. "He said the cave had been a meeting place once, where different peoples came together in peace." She hesitated, then added, "I've seen you watching. For days now." "Yes." Shadow Wolf made no attempt to deny it. Outside, the storm raged like 1,000 angry spirits, but here time seemed to slow, to create a space between moments where truth could emerge. "I was sent to raid your home, to drive you out or worse. But you didn't." It wasn't a question. Sarah met his gaze steadily across the fire. "Because of the songs. The songs. The way you walk upon the earth, the respect you show to plants, that heal." He touched his grandmother's medicine pouch. "You remind me of someone I once knew." Sarah added a small piece of wood to the fire. "My father learned from an Apache medicine woman. She saved his life, then taught him their healing ways. He passed what he could to me, though I know I speak the words poorly." "Not poorly," Shadow Wolf corrected, "but like a child learning. Its first steps. The meaning is there, even if the tongue stumbles." He found himself wanting to smile again, an unfamiliar sensation after so many years of warrior's stoicism. The storm's voice rose and fell around them as they talked, first of healing plants they both knew, then of the pictographs on the walls, their meanings passed down through generations. Sarah shared stories of her father's work, bridging two, a people's medicines. Shadow Wolf spoke of his grandmother's wisdom, surprised at how easily the memories flowed. Hours passed, marked only by the need to tend the fire. When Sarah began to shiver despite the flames, Shadow Wolf silently removed his ceremonial blanket and offered it to her. She accepted with a graceful nod that reminded him again of his grandmother. "When the storm passes," he said quietly, "everything must appear unchanged. There are those who would not understand." He left the warning unfinished. "I know," Sarah replied, "but perhaps the storm itself is a sign. My father always said that great changes, like great healings, often begin in moments of chaos." Shadow Wolf gazed at the ancient paintings on the walls, thinking of his broken arrow, of Red Horse's warning, of paths that forked like lightning across dark skies. In this cave, with this woman who sang his grandmother's songs, even chaos began to feel like destiny. The old wound began troubling Shadow Wolf as soon as the storm passed. 3 summers ago, a cavalry soldier's bullet had torn through his shoulder, and though it had healed, the desert's fury could still wake its ghost. He tried to hide his discomfort during his twilight watch over Sarah's cabin, but she noticed his stiffness when he moved. "Let me help," she said softly one evening, emerging from her door with her father's medicine bowl, a weathered vessel of dark wood, its rim carved with interlocking symbols of healing. Shadow Wolf recognized the ancient patterns: snake for transformation, eagle for spirit sight, bear for strength in pain. He should have disappeared into the gathering darkness. Instead, he found himself following her inside, drawn by the familiar scents rising from the bowl: creosote, desert sage, and something deeper, earthier, that spoke of old magic and older wisdom. "Your father's?" he asked, nodding toward the bowl as Sarah added hot water to the herbs. "His teachers, the Apache medicine woman." Sarah's fingers traced the carved symbols. Morning Star was her name. She said this bowl had served 3 generations of healers before her. Steam rose between them, carrying memories. The night she gave it to him, she said sometimes the greatest medicine is in crossing boundaries others fear to cross. Shadow Wolf's hand went to his shoulder, remembering. Morning Star. She was my grandmother's closest friend. The revelation hung in the air between them, another thread connecting their separate worlds. She disappeared during the last big raids. We never knew. She found my father dying of snake bite near Sweetwater Creek, Sarah said quietly, mixing the herbs with practiced motions. Instead of leaving him, she risked everything to heal him. They worked together for 10 years after that, sharing their knowledge, helping anyone who came to them, settler or Apache. She looked up at him. "That's why I stayed after he died. This was their dream, a place of healing, not hatred." The cabin's single lamp cast dancing shadows as Sarah gently helped Shadow Wolf remove his shirt. The bullet scar was an angry star against his copper skin. Her touch was sure but respectful as she began applying the warm herbs, singing softly, the same healing song he remembered his grandmother using. The words slightly awkward, but the power unmistakable. "You carry the gift," he said, surprised by the immediate easing of pain, not just the knowledge but the healing touch itself. Morning Star told my father that true healing comes from the heart's wisdom, not just the mind's learning. Sarah worked the medicine into the scar tissue with small circular motions. "I've always felt that wisdom is wisdom, no matter which people it comes from." Shadow Wolf closed his eyes, letting the herbs and song do their work. His grandmother had taught him some of the healing ways before he chose the warrior's path, saying that even warriors need to know how to mend what gets broken. He found himself humming along with Sarah's song, their voices twining together in the lamplit darkness. When she finished, Sarah placed the medicine bowl between them. In its carved depths, he saw the future as Morning Star might have seen it, a place where healing flowed both ways, across manufactured boundaries, where ancient wisdom could light new paths. "My grandmother would say this is no coincidence," Shadow Wolf said finally, "You here in this valley, morning stars bowl, the old songs finding new voice. And you," Sarah added softly, "choosing to watch over rather than destroy." She began cleaning the bowl with the same care she'd shown in the healing. "What happens now?" Shadow Wolf stood, reading the night's calling in the desert sounds beyond. Her door. "Now I return to my people carrying more than just a healed wound." He touched the medicine bowl one last time, feeling the generations of healers whose hands had worn its patterns smooth. "But I will return. There is more here to learn, and perhaps to teach." As he melted into the darkness, Sarah's voice followed. Him, no longer singing healing songs, but humming a lullaby he remembered from childhood, one his grandmother had often sung. He wondered if Morning Star had taught it to her too, another bridge built by those who had come before. Sarah worked on the blanket during the quiet hours before dawn, when the desert air still held its nighttime chill. Her grandmother had taught her weaving in Philadelphia, but it was Morning Star's patterns that now emerged from her loom. Designs she had carefully copied from her father's notebooks, each one heavy with meaning. The wool came from her own. Small flock of sheep, carefully washed and carded, then dyed with plants she gathered, indigo for wisdom, red ochre for strength, yellow from snakeweed for protection. As she wove, she found herself humming the songs Shadow Wolf had begun teaching her during his increasingly frequent visits. Prayers for harmony, for balance, for understanding. He arrived as she was adding the final border, materializing from the pre-dawn shadows like a spirit taking form. Sarah had stopped being startled by his silent approaches, had learned to sense his presence before she saw him. "You weave our patterns," he said, watching her hands move across the loom. There was no accusation in his voice, only curiosity. "I hope I do them justice." Sarah tied off the final thread. "Your grandmother's friend taught my father more than just healing. She believed that medicine comes in many forms, herbs, songs, and the things we create with prayer in our hearts." Shadow Wolf moved closer, studying the intricate designs. "Here is the mountain." His finger traced a stepped pyramid pattern. "And here the river that gives life." He paused at a more complex symbol. "And this is the path between worlds. The path we walk now," Sarah said softly, lifting the blanket from the loom. She had made it larger than traditional Apache blankets, incorporating techniques from her grandmother's teaching with Morning Star's sacred patterns. "It's for you." Shadow Wolf's hand hesitated above the wool. "Such gifts. They create bonds not easily broken." "I know." Sarah held the blanket out. Morning light was beginning to paint the canyon walls, turning them the same rich red as the ochre in the weaving. "I've made my choice, as you made yours that night in the storm." He accepted the blanket with the ceremony such a gift deserved, wrapping it around his shoulders where it settled like a second skin. The patterns seemed to come alive in the dawn light, dancing, shifting, telling their ancient stories. "My people say that when you wear someone's weaving, you carry their prayers with you," he said. "Each pattern is a word in the language of the heart. Then read what I have woven," Sarah replied, her voice steady despite her racing pulse. She had poured weeks of dawn-lit hours into the blanket, each pattern chosen with purpose, each color a word in itself. Shadow Wolf's eyes moved across the designs, reading them as clearly as Sarah might read her father's Bible. "Here is healing," he began, "and here protection. The river of life flows through the sacred mountains. Eagle and wolf walk the same path." He stopped, finding the central pattern she had worked so carefully to create. "Two spirits dancing," he said quietly, "the symbol of souls destined to meet." "Morning Star used it in her medicine blankets," Sarah explained. "My father's journals say it represents the joining of different powers to create something stronger than either alone." Shadow Wolf wrapped the blanket more tightly around himself. "When I was a boy, my grandmother showed me such a pattern in the old caves. She said it was a reminder that the strongest medicine comes from bringing together what others would keep apart." He moved to Sarah's small window, looking out at the dawn-painted desert. "I have been teaching you our words," he said, "but you have been teaching me too. Things I had forgotten, things I never knew I needed to learn." Sarah stood beside him, close enough to touch the blanket's edge. "There are those who would not understand," she echoed his words from the storm cave. "There are those who already do not understand." Shadow Wolf turned to face her. "Red Horse watches. The other warriors whisper. They see me here too often, learning a woman's wisdom when I should be planning raids. And yet you come. And yet I come." He touched one of the blanket's patterns, the path between worlds. "Because some songs must be sung, even when others would silence them. Some paths must be walked, even when others would close them." The rising sun filled her small cabin with light, making the blanket's patterns glow like living things. Sarah realized she was holding her breath, waiting for whatever would come next. "Teach me more of your tongue," Shadow Wolf said finally, "and I will teach you more of mine. Perhaps between the two, we will find the words for what is growing here." Sarah nodded, hearing all that lay beneath his simple request. Like the blanket's intertwined patterns, they were creating something new, something that walked between worlds and was stronger for the journey. The war chief's eagle feather cast a long shadow across the council fire. Its tip dyed red with ogre, the color of judgment. Black Horse, eldest of the tribal leaders, held it with grave authority as he faced Shadow Wolf. The warriors' circle was complete. 15 of the tribe's most respected fighters, their faces illuminated by dancing flames, their eyes heavy with accusation. "We have watched," Black Horse said, his voice carrying the weight of generations. "We have seen our most feared warrior become a woman's shadow, seen him wrap himself in settler's magic." His eyes fixed on the woven blanket, Shadow Wolf still. "War. The same Shadow Wolf, who once led 3 raids in a single moon, now speaks of peace and healing." Red Horse stepped forward, holding the pieces of the broken arrow from that night above Sarah's cabin. "I kept my silence, brother, out of respect for our years together, but this has gone too far. The settlers push closer every season. Our children go hungry while you learn songs from the very ones who steal our lands." Shadow Wolf remained standing, straight and proud, despite the circle of judgment closing around him. The blanket Sarah had woven seemed to warm him with her strength, its patterns telling stories of bridges rather than barriers. "I have not forgotten who I am," he said, his voice carrying to every ear. "Nor have I forgotten the teachings that came before our time of war. Our grandmothers were healers before they were warriors. Our songs were medicines before they became battle cries." "Pretty words," spat Young Eagle, a warrior Shadow Wolf himself had trained. "Words that smell of settlers' influence. Will these songs feed our people? Will they protect our sacred places from the white man's greed?" Black Horse raised the war chief's feather, calling for silence. "There is truth in what the young one says. We did not give you your name for your healing songs, Shadow Wolf. We named you for your ability to strike unseen, to protect our people through strength and cunning. And have I not done so?" Shadow Wolf's hand went to his grandmother's medicine pouch. 20 years I have fought. 20 years I have carried your trust and honor. Now I tell you there is another way, one our ancestors knew before bullets and borders divided the land. He reached into the pouch, withdrawing a pinch of sacred herbs. With deliberate ceremony, he cast them into the fire. Sweet smoke rose, carrying memories of older times. Several of the elder warriors inhaled deeply, recognition flickering in their eyes. "The woman you condemn," Shadow Wolf continued. "She was taught by Morningstar herself. She carries medicine knowledge that belonged to our people before the wars began. Knowledge we are losing with each generation that chooses the war path over the healing way." A murmur ran through the circle. Morningstar's name still carried power. She had been legendary among their people before her disappearance. Black Horse himself had been healed by her hands as a young man. "You speak of the old ways," Red Horse challenged, "but what of our new enemies? What of the soldiers who burn our camps, the settlers who poison our waters? There are settlers who deserve our rage, Shadow Wolf agreed. But there are also those who remember what we have forgotten, that the Earth's medicine is meant for all her children. Sarah Thompson walks this path. Through her, Morningstar's wisdom lives on. Would you have me destroy this bridge to our own heritage? Black Horse studied the war chief's feather, its red tip gleaming like fresh blood. You risk much, Shadow Wolf. The young ones look to you as an example. If you choose this path, then I choose it knowing its cost. Shadow Wolf straightened, meeting each warrior's gaze in turn. Strip me of my war name if you must. Take back the honor you gave me. But know this, I have found medicine stronger than war, wisdom deeper than hatred. The woman's songs awaken what we have lost. Silence fell heavy as desert night. Black Horse slowly lowered the feather, its shadow now barely visible in the dying fire. 3 days, he said finally. You have 3 days to prove your words. Have substance. Show us this wisdom you speak of. Show us why we should not drive this woman out and reclaim our fiercest warrior. If you fail, Red Horse added, I myself will lead the raid on her cabin, and you will either stand with us or die with her. Shadow Wolf bowed his head, accepting the challenge. As he turned to leave the circle, he felt the weight of the blanket around his shoulders, each pattern a reminder of what he fought to preserve, each thread a link between worlds that others would keep apart. 3 days to bridge an abyss, generations deep. 3 days to turn warriors into healers once again. Marshal Wade Clayton's badge caught the afternoon sun as he dismounted in front of Sarah's cabin, the silver star throwing harsh light against her door. 2 other riders flanked him, Samuel Martinez, looking uncomfortable, and James Cooper, whose nearby ranch had lost 3 cattle to Apache raids the previous month. Sarah set down her father's medicine bag, which she'd been organizing, and stepped onto her porch. The marshal's presence this far out could mean nothing good. She'd heard whispers in town, seen the way other settlers drew away when she passed, their voices dropping to suspicious murmurs. Miss Thompson. Clayton touched the brim of his hat, but his eyes were hard. Seems we need to have us a conversation about your particular situation out here. The badge gleamed like an accusation as he stepped closer. Sarah had always thought it strange how a simple piece of silver could grant one man power over others' lives. Her father had his own stories. About Clayton, a man who saw the world in simple divisions of right and wrong, us and them. Samuel here, Clayton gestured to the Mexican trader, has been telling me some disturbing tales about singing at odd hours, about Apache words coming from a white woman's lips. He paused, letting the weight of it settle. About tracks around your property that appear and disappear like ghost signs. Sarah met his gaze steadily. I tend my garden, Marshal. I sing the songs my father taught me. If you're seeking ghosts, you've ridden a long way for nothing. Your father, Clayton's voice softened with false concern, was a good man. Bit odd in his ways, mixing with Indians, but he was respected. Folks understood his doctor's curiosity about native remedies, but you, Miss Thompson, a woman alone out here, keeping strange habits. Strange habits. Sarah felt heat rise in her cheeks, like healing Cooper's boy last month when fever took him, like showing Martinez's wife which plants could ease her birthing pains. Cooper shifted in his saddle. That's different, Miss Sarah. We're grateful for the doctoring, but he glanced at Clayton. There's been talk about Shadow Wolf's band operating in these parts, about how your place never gets raided while other homesteads suffer. The marshal's badge seemed to gather all the desert's heat as Clayton leaned forward. People are starting to wonder if there's a reason for that, if maybe you've made some kind of arrangement. The only arrangement I have, Sarah said carefully, is with the truth my father taught me, that healing knows no boundaries, that wisdom can flow both ways across the borders men create. Pretty words. Clayton's hand rested casually on his gun belt. But we're living in dangerous times, Miss Thompson. Settlers are nervous. They need to know where everyone's loyalties lie. Sarah thought of the medicine bowl, of shared songs, in the darkness, of a warrior learning to trust in peace. My loyalty is to healing, Marshal, to continuing my father's work. Your father's work? Clayton's laugh was short and sharp. Your father was a respected doctor who occasionally learned Indian tricks. You're a woman alone in Apache territory, speaking their tongue, following their ways. Some folks are starting to think you've gone native. Others wonder if you're passing information to the hostiles. That's a serious accusation, Marshal. Sarah's voice remained steady despite her pounding heart. It is indeed. Clayton straightened, his badge a shield of authority. Serious enough that I'm giving you fair warning. You have 3 days to pack up and move into town, where we can keep a proper eye on you. After that, he let the threat hang unfinished. And if I refuse, then I can't guarantee your safety when the next Apache raid comes. Funny thing about raids. Sometimes it's hard to tell friend from foe in the chaos. His smile didn't reach. His eyes. 3 days, Miss Thompson, for your own good. As the riders departed, Sarah sank onto her porch steps, the weight of the marshal's ultimatum pressing down like summer heat. 3 days. The same precious time her father always said could mean the difference between healing and harm, between life and death. She looked out across her small valley, touching the medicine bag beside her. Somewhere out there, Shadow Wolf faced his own trials, his own choices. Like opposing winds meeting before a storm, their separate worlds were rushing toward a collision that neither might survive. The peace pipe lay wrapped in ceremonial buckskin between them, its red stone bowl and wooden stem bearing the scars and wisdom of generations. Shadow Wolf had brought it from the tribe's sacred bundle, where it had lain unused since his grandfather's time. Such pipes once spoke of treaties between peoples, of promises sealed in sacred smoke, before trust crumbled like desert rock in summer heat. They give us both 3 days, Sarah said softly, her fingers hovering over the pipe without touching it. Even in the dim light of her cabin, she could see the worn places where countless hands had held it in council. 3 days. To choose between worlds, or to build a bridge between them. Shadow Wolf carefully unwrapped the pipe, letting the buckskin fall away. My grandmother told me stories of this pipe, how it was smoked when the first settlers came, before fear poisoned both sides, how its smoke carried prayers for understanding, to the 4 winds. Sarah opened her father's journal, showing him a careful sketch of a similar pipe. Morning Star spoke of it too. She told my father that real peace wasn't in papers signed by leaders, but in hearts opened by shared medicine. Outside, the desert wind carried dust and whispers, of Marshal Clayton's men watching from distant ridges, of Red Horse's warriors, moving like shadows through arroyos, of 2 worlds holding their breath before the storm. The Marshal thinks I'm a traitor, Sarah continued, her voice steady despite the cost of speaking it aloud. That I've betrayed my people by learning your ways, speaking your tongue. He says the town won't tolerate a woman who's gone native. And my people believe I have grown weak. Shadow Wolf's hand went to the woven blanket he still wore. That I dishonor my warrior's name by learning settlers' songs, seeking peace when they hunger for war. He lifted the pipe, studying its carvings. In the lamplight, perhaps we are both traitors, or perhaps we are both true to something older than the hatred that divides us. Sarah reached for her father's medicine bag, withdrawing a small pouch of sacred tobacco, Morning Star's last gift to him. She said to use it only in greatest need, when the path ahead seemed darkest. Shadow Wolf nodded slowly. The tobacco is female medicine, the pipe male. Together they make whole medicine. His eyes met hers. But if we do this thing, if we smoke the peace pipe with intentions for both peoples, there can be no turning back. We will be bound by something stronger than loyalty to single tribes. I already feel bound, Sarah admitted. Each time I sing the healing songs, each time I gather plants with prayers in both tongues, I choose this path again." She opened the tobacco pouch, letting its sweet scent fill the air. "What else can we do? Watch our peoples destroy each other, while wisdom dies and hatred grows." Shadow Wolf began filling the pipe with practiced reverence, each movement a prayer in itself. "There is risk. Red Horse and his warriors will not accept peace easily. Their hearts are too full of past wounds. And Clayton's badge carries the weight of settler law. He will see any reaching across borders as betrayal." Sarah watched the tobacco fill the red stone bowl. "But my father believed in this healing. Morningstar believed. Your grandmother believed. Perhaps it's time for their dreams to flower in new soil." The pipe was ready now, its presence between them as heavy as history itself. Shadow Wolf lifted it with ceremonial dignity. In the old days, when two peoples shared the pipe, it created bonds not even death could break. Their medicines would flow together like rivers joining, becoming stronger than either alone. Sarah straightened, feeling the weight of the moment settle around her like a blanket. "Then let us make new medicine, you and I. Let us show both peoples there is power in walking between worlds." Shadow Wolf nodded and struck a match. The tobacco caught quickly, its smoke rising in grey ribbons. He took the first ritual puff, offering prayers in Apache, then passed the pipe to Sarah. She accepted it with steady hands, adding her own prayers in English before returning it. Back and forth, the pipe moved between them, each draw binding them more deeply to their chosen path. The smoke carried their shared vision upward, of a place where healing flowed freely between peoples, where wisdom was measured by its power to unite rather than divide. When the last ember faded, they sat in silence, letting the medicine settle into their spirits. Finally, Shadow Wolf re-wrapped the pipe in its buckskin covering. "Now we are more than Apache and settler," he said softly. "We are medicine people, of a new way. The old ones will know what this means, even if others do not yet understand." Sarah touched the medicine bag at her side, feeling the power of two traditions flowing together within it. 3 days to show them, 3 days to build. A bridge strong enough to hold both peoples, or 3 days to watch both our worlds burn. Shadow Wolf stood, the weight of their choice settling around him like his warrior's mantle. "Come. There is much to prepare, and the sun rises quickly when destiny awaits." The drum's deep voice carried across the valley at dusk, its rhythm speaking older words than any tongue could shape. Black Horse himself played it, the sacred war drum that had called Apache warriors to battle for 5 generations. But tonight, its rhythm was different, complex, weaving patterns that hadn't been heard since the time of peace councils. Sarah recognized the change from her father's teachings. "The drum speaks of choosing," she said softly to Shadow Wolf, as they watched riders gathering at both ends of her valley. Not war rhythms, but decision rhythms. Clayton's men approached from the west, a dozen mounted figures silhouetted against the setting sun. From the east came the Apache warriors, Red Horse at their head, their horses moving like wind spirits. Through gathering shadows, the drum's voice held them all in its pattern, keeping them apart, yet drawing them together. "The old ones understand." Shadow Wolf nodded toward Black Horse, who sat with the drum before the tribal council. "They remember when this drum spoke of meetings between peoples, not just calls to war." His hand touched the peace pipe secured at his belt. "But the young ones grow restless. They hear only the drum's surface voice, not its deeper song." As if to confirm his words, young Eagle suddenly broke from the Apache line, brandishing his rifle and shouting war cries. At the same moment, James Cooper spurred his horse forward from Clayton's group, his own weapon raised. The drum's rhythm intensified, matching the mounting tension. "No!" Sarah's voice cut through the dusk like summer lightning. She walked forward deliberately, emptying her hands to show she carried no weapons. Behind her, Shadow Wolf moved like her own shadow, alert but equally empty-handed. The drum's voice shifted again, following her steps. Black Horse was weaving medicine rhythms now. healing patterns that hadn't been played in a generation. Several older Apache warriors nodded in recognition, while their younger counterparts shifted uneasily in their saddles. "Look at them," Clayton's voice carried clearly across the valley. "The Apache witch and her tame warrior. See how she's corrupted him with her unnatural ways." He urged his horse forward, his badge catching the last rays of sunlight. "Time to end this confusion, Miss Thompson. Choose now, ride back to town with us, or face the consequences." Red Horse's voice answered from the other side. "And you, Shadow Wolf, take up your weapons and stand with your people, or die with the settler woman. The time for walking between worlds is over." The drum whispered now, a gentle heartbeat in the gathering dark. Sarah felt its rhythm in her blood, remembering her father's words about moments of greatest healing coming at times of deepest division. She began to sing, not her usual evening song, but the ancient medicine chant Morning Star had taught her father. Shadow Wolf's voice joined hers, their words twining together in both languages. The drum shifted to support them. Black Horse's weathered hands drawing forth rhythms not heard since the last peace council. Other elderly voices joined in, Apache men and women who remembered the old songs, the old ways. Young Eagle's rifle barrel dipped slightly. "What witchery is this?" "Not witchery," Black Horse called out, his hands never leaving the drum. "Medicine, the kind our grandfathers knew before we forgot the taste of peace." "Medicine?" Clayton's laugh was harsh. "Sounds like Apache devil work to me. Cooper, Martinez, take the woman. Time to show these savages what law means in civilized territory." But Martinez didn't move. He was staring at Sarah with dawning recognition. "My wife," he said slowly. "The birth that nearly killed her. The way Miss Thompson sang while she worked. Songs that made the pain less." He straightened in his saddle. "That was this medicine, wasn't it? These same songs?" The drum's voice grew stronger as Sarah nodded. "Morning Star's songs. Healing songs that belong to all peoples, if we're wise enough to hear them." Red Horse pushed his horse forward. "Songs will not feed our children. Songs will not stop the settlers from taking our lands." "No," Shadow Wolf agreed. "But medicine might show us new ways to live together, as it did in our grandfather's time. Look how the drum remembers, even if we have forgotten." The valley held its breath. Rifles remained lifted, horses pawed the earth, and the drum continued its ancient rhythm. In the deepening darkness, choices hung like stars waiting to be read, paths of war and peace, separation and healing, all turning on this moment between heartbeats. Then Black Horse began a new rhythm, one that made the oldest Apache warriors catch their breath in recognition. The Peace Council rhythm, not heard in 40 years. The drum that had called so many to war now sang of its original purpose, bringing peoples together in sacred trust. From the medicine bag at his hip, Black Horse withdrew a single eagle feather, not the war chief's blood-tipped judgment feather, but one older still. Its shaft was wrapped in bands of dyed porcupine quills, white for wisdom, blue for truth, and gold for healing. In the deepening twilight, it seemed to hold its own soft light. "My grandfather's grandfather carried this," Black Horse said, his voice carrying clearly across the hushed valley. "He used it to write the last true peace between peoples before the time of bullets and borders." The drum's gentle rhythm continued beneath his words, a heartbeat connecting past to present. "More Indian magic," Clayton scoffed, but his voice held a note of uncertainty. The badge on his chest caught the last light like a dying star. "Not magic, Marshal." Sarah's voice was quiet but firm. "Medicine. The same medicine that saved Cooper's son, that helped Martinez's wife, that healed wounds on both sides before we forgot how to listen to each other." She moved forward slowly, her father's medicine bag open in her hands. From it, she drew something that made the oldest Apache women gasp in recognition. "Morning Star's feather," one of them whispered, "the one she used in her strongest healings." The two feathers caught the same light, seemed to speak to each other across the divide. Black Horse nodded slowly. So she did survive, and chose to pass her medicine to one who could bridge the gap. My father earned her trust, Sarah said, not through force or cunning, but through respect for her wisdom. She taught him that true healing requires both sides to let go of fear. She held the feather up. Every morning I pray with this feather for the strength to continue her work, to prove that wisdom knows no color, that healing flows where it is needed. Shadow Wolf stepped forward, standing between the feathers as he had stood between worlds. I have seen this medicine work, seen how it brings forth what is best in both peoples. The peace pipe we shared spoke true. There is power in walking between worlds, not just in defending borders. Young Eagle's horse shifted restlessly. Pretty. Words from a warrior gone soft. What of our hungry children? What of our stolen lands? What of my ranch? Cooper shot back. The cattle raids? The burned homesteads? The drum's voice deepened, and Black Horse lifted his feather higher. Once we knew how to share these lands. The eagle feather remembers, even if we have forgotten. It saw how medicine people from both sides would meet in sacred places, sharing wisdom that made all stronger. Those days are dead, Clayton declared, but Martinez urged his horse forward. Are they? The Mexican trader looked from one feather to the other. My wife lives because of shared medicine. My children thrive because Miss Thompson knew plants that would cure their fever. Apache plants, prepared with settler knowledge. He turned to Clayton. What if there is something here older than our fears, stronger than our hatred? Red Horse's hand tightened on his rifle. The settlers understand only force. They push us into smaller and smaller spaces, then call us savage when we defend ourselves. And you raid our homes, Cooper countered, steal our cattle, kill our people. How can there be peace with those who only understand violence? The two feathers seemed to pulse with their own light now, as if absorbing the anger, the fear, the generations of pain that flowed from both sides. Black Horse began to sing, an ancient calling song that made the oldest Apache warriors straighten in their saddles. Sarah recognized it from her father's teachings and joined her voice to his, the words coming naturally despite their complexity. Shadow Wolf's voice joined them, then others. Old voices that remembered, young voices that yearned for something beyond endless conflict. The drum wove it all together, creating a space where anger could not breathe, where the wisdom of the eagle feathers could finally be heard. Tomorrow's sun will rise on either peace or war, Black Horse said when the song faded. The feathers remember a time when we were wise enough to choose the harder path, the path of understanding. He looked at Clayton. Your law is young, written on paper that crumbles. Our law is old, written in the way of eagle and wolf, in the wisdom of plants that heal, in songs that carry medicine to all who need it. Sarah held Morningstar's feather toward the gathering darkness. Two feathers, two peoples, one land beneath them. My father believed, as Morningstar believed, that we are stronger together than apart, that true law lives in wisdom shared, in healing freely given, in respect freely earned. The valley held its breath. The drum's rhythm slowed to match a heartbeat. On its next beat, the choice would come. Peace or war, wisdom or fear, a new path or the old cycle of vengeance. The eagle feathers waited, bearing witness to whatever tomorrow's sun would bring. The first shot came from the shadows, shattering the drum's peaceful rhythm. Before its echo could fade, chaos erupted across the valley. Young Eagle's rifle answered, then Cooper's, until the twilight air filled with death's angry hornets. Shadow Wolf moved with warrior's instinct, pulling Sarah behind a stone outcropping. His shield, carried but unused through 20 years of raids, now served its first true purpose. The hardened buffalo hide painted with protective medicine. Symbols sheltered them both as bullets sparked against rock. Your own people shoot at you now, Sarah said softly, checking her father's medicine bag for damage. And mine at me. Fear shoots at us, Shadow Wolf corrected, studying the battlefield. Through the shield's edge. Fear of change, of losing what little each side still holds. He could see Clayton organizing his men for a charge, while Red Horse gathered warriors for a flanking attack. The Peace Council was dissolving into the very bloodshed they had tried to prevent. Black Horse's voice rose above the gunfire, still trying to call order with the damaged drum. But newer, harder rhythms had taken hold. Horses' hooves, rifles' crack, men's shouts in two languages. The eagle feathers had been tucked away, their wisdom drowned in powder smoke. Sarah touched the shield's surface, fingers tracing its medicine. Patterns. "These are healing symbols," she said with surprise. "Not war magic at all." Shadow Wolf nodded. "My grandmother painted them. Said a true warrior's shield should carry protection for all who shelter behind it, friend or foe." He shifted the shield as more bullets struck nearby. "I never understood until now." Through the growing darkness they could see the two groups, maneuvering for advantage. But something was wrong with the pattern. Young Eagle and 3 other warriors had broken from Red Horse's control, circling wide through shadow. On the settler side, Cooper and 2 others had separated from Clayton's formation, working their way around the valley's edge. "They mean to fire the cabin," Sarah realized. "Both sides destroy what they fear, erase the possibility of peace." Shadow Wolf saw it too. The shield in his hand suddenly felt lighter, its purpose clearer. "Your father's work is in there. Morningstar's teachings, the medicine of both peoples. All the bridges we've built." Sarah met his eyes. "We can't let them burn it away." The shield's patterns seemed to move in the darkness, like living things awakening. Shadow Wolf remembered his grandmother's words as she painted them. A shield's highest purpose is not to protect the warrior, but to protect what the warrior holds sacred. Around them, the battle was building toward its deadly climax. Red Horse and Clayton's men traded fire across diminishing space. Black Horse had abandoned the ruined drum, now working with the older Apache to evacuate women and children. The valley that had held Peace Council hours before had become a graveyard for hope. But hope, like medicine, could flow from unexpected sources. "The shield is big enough for 2, Shadow Wolf said quietly. Sarah nodded, understanding. "Together, then, as we have been since the first song." They rose as one, the shield before them. Its medicine symbols caught stray flames from the first torches, seeming to dance within a light. Together they moved toward the cabin, their voices joining in Morningstar's strongest healing song. The sound caught young Eagle in mid-stride, torch half raised. On the other side, Cooper's hand froze on his weapon. The song was both Apache and English now, both ancient and new, carrying power that spoke to blood older than rivalry. "Choose!" Sarah's voice rang across the valley. "Choose what you will tell your children about this night. Will you speak of how fear burned away hope, or how wisdom proved stronger than hatred?" Shadow Wolf held the shield higher, its patterns glowing like earthbound stars. "Look at these symbols, my people. Marks our grandmothers made, telling us that true strength lies in protecting what is sacred, what is more sacred than the medicine that could heal both peoples." The shield caught moonlight now, casting its healing patterns across the battlefield. Young Eagle's torch wavered, then dropped. Cooper's rifle barrel dipped toward earth. The song grew stronger as other voices joined. First the older ones who remembered, then younger ones who dared to hope. But Red Horse's voice cut through the growing harmony. "Pretty medicine does not stop bullets, brother." His rifle aimed at Shadow Wolf's heart. "Let us end this confusion with warrior's truth." Clayton's answering shout came from darkness. "For once, I agree with the savage. Some things can only be settled with steel and powder." The shield's patterns flickered, like captured lightning. Behind it, Shadow Wolf and Sarah faced both sides of their divided world, singing peace in the face of war's final argument. Sarah's fingers found her mother's locket beneath her dress, the last piece of Philadelphia she still carried. Inside, 2 faces gazed from age-softened photographs, her mother in proper Eastern dress, her father in his frontier doctor's coat. Between them, she had added a pressed desert marigold, its yellow petals preserved like captured sunlight. As Red Horse and Clayton took aim, she opened the locket with trembling fingers. "My father believed in something bigger than borders," she called out, holding up the small silver heart. "He carried medicine from both worlds, healing anyone who needed help. Apache, settler, Mexican, pain knows no boundaries." The shield's patterns rippled in the moonlight as Shadow Wolf's voice joined hers. "And my grandmother taught that true. Healing comes from walking between worlds, not building walls between them." His free hand touched the medicine pouch at his belt. "We stand here offering not surrender, but a different kind of strength." From the shadows, Black Horse spoke. "The old ones are watching, Red Horse. Think carefully before you send a healing song to the spirit world." "And you, Clayton," Martinez added, urging his horse forward. "How will you explain to the territory governor why you destroyed a doctor's your daughter and her life's work? How many of our children will suffer without her medicine?" The locket caught moonlight, throwing silver reflections across the battlefield. Sarah's mother had worn it through the Civil War, keeping hope alive while healing soldiers from both sides. Now, her daughter held it up like a beacon, letting its light touch each face in turn. "Look inside yourselves," she pleaded. "Look at the wounds we all carry, not just in flesh but in spirit. How many generations will we poison with hatred before we remember how to heal?" Young Eagle stepped forward, torch still smoking at his feet. "I remember when I was a boy. My sister was dying of fever. No medicine man could help, but a settler doctor came, worked through the night with our healers." His eyes widened. "It was your father." "Yes." Sarah's voice softened. "And his teacher was Morning Star, who saved him so he could save others. This is how medicine should flow, back and forth, growing stronger with each sharing." The locket's silver face reflected flame and starlight, earth and sky. Like the shield's patterns, it seemed to hold wisdom waiting to be read. Clayton's rifle barrel dipped slightly as he studied the scene before him. Not a witch and her savage, but a healer and her protector standing together against the night. Red Horse's horse stepped closer into the light. "You speak of healing. Woman, but what of justice? What of the wrongs done to my people?" Sarah opened the locket wider, letting its photograph speak across years. "Justice begins with truth, with admitting that wisdom flows both ways, that neither people holds all the medicine." She touched the pressed flower between her parents' images. "Desert marigold, your people taught mine that it helps stop bleeding. How many settler lives? Has that knowledge saved? How many Apache children have lived because my father shared his medicines?" The shield's patterns seemed to dance in harmony with the locket's light. Shadow Wolf's voice carried power, learned from 20 years of command. "We stand at a crossroads, my brother. Behind us lies the path of blood and vengeance. Before us, a harder trail, one that requires more courage than battle." Black Horse moved into the circle of light, the damaged drum cradled in his arms. "I have lived long enough to see wisdom in strange places, to recognize medicine even when it wears." An unfamiliar face. He looked at Clayton. "Your law is young, written on paper. Our laws are old, carved in stone and wind. Perhaps it is time for both to learn from each other." The locket's silver heart caught starfire, seemed to pulse with its own life. Sarah began to sing again, not Morning Star's song this time, but one older still. The melody rose from some deep place of remembering, words in Apache and English, and languages older than both, calling to something beyond hatred's reach. Shadow Wolf recognized the song. His grandmother had sung it at healing ceremonies, saying, "It came from the time before divisions, when medicine flowed free as water." His voice joined Sarah's, the shield's patterns rippling in harmony with their shared music. One by one, other voices joined. First the older Apache women, then Martinez and his wife, then younger warriors who dared to imagine a different future. The song grew, changed, became something new yet ancient. The locket's light touched face after face, revealing tears on weathered cheeks, hope in young eyes. the possibility of change in hardened hearts. Even Clayton's badge seemed to dim as the song rose around him. Red Horse's rifle pointed at stars now, not hearts. The valley held its breath, watching night turn toward dawn, watching hatred's power fade before something stronger, the medicine of shared songs, shared wisdom, shared hope. Dawn found them gathering herbs together, Apache women and settler wives, their skirts wet with dew as they moved through Sarah's garden and the surrounding wildlands. The bundle they created grew slowly. Desert sage, chosen by weathered Apache hands, English lavender from Sarah's carefully tended beds, wild motherwort that both peoples had used for generations. Shadow Wolf watched from the cabin's porch, his shield now resting beside the door like a guardian spirit. Beside him, Red Horse sat in uncharacteristic silence, studying the women's work with complex emotions playing across his face. "My mother knew these medicines," Red Horse said finally, touching a sprig of sage in the growing bundle. "Before the soldiers came, before we learned to trust only in weapons, she was known for her healing touch." Sarah approached carefully, carrying the bound herbs. The morning light caught threads of silver in her hair, markers of wisdom earned through trial. "Would you like to learn her ways again? There are some here who still remember." Red Horse's hand withdrew sharply, but his eyes lingered on the bundle. Shadow Wolf recognized the warrior's struggle, the pull between old ways and new, between pride and healing. He had walked that path himself, not so many moons ago. From the garden, Martinez's wife called out in excitement, holding up a rare flowering plant. The Apache women gathered round, their shared knowledge flowing in two languages. The herbs they collected would be divided between peoples, carried to places of healing on both sides of the imaginary lines men drew across the earth. Clayton had ridden back to town at first light, his badge somehow less bright, his certainties shaken by the night's events. But he had left behind a promise. As long as the peace held, as long as the healing served both peoples, he would keep his men away from this valley. "It won't be easy," Shadow Wolf said, watching the women work. "There are many on both sides who prefer the old hatreds, who find comfort in seeing only enemies." "Like I did?" Red Horse's smile held no humor, but perhaps a hint of understanding. "Perhaps that is why the old ones say the hardest medicine to swallow is the truth about ourselves." Sarah tied off the herb bundle with strands of red and white cloth, colors of both peoples intertwined. The morning breeze carried its mixed fragrance across the valley, a promise of new possibilities. Young Eagle appeared from the garden, his arms full of fresh-gathered plants, learning from the women the proper ways of harvesting, the songs that should be sung. "Your grandmother would be proud," Sarah said softly to Shadow Wolf, "to see medicine flowing between peoples again, to see healing grow stronger than hate." Shadow Wolf touched the herb bundle gently, and Morning Star would smile to see her teachings bloom in new soil. He looked at Red Horse. "There is power in this medicine, brother. Different from war medicine, but no less strong." Red Horse stood slowly, warrior's pride wrestling with new understanding. "The young ones watch us," he said. "What we do here will shape their paths." His hand moved to the broken arrow still tucked in his belt. Perhaps it is time they learned more than one kind of strength." From the garden came sounds of laughter. Martinez's youngest daughter playing with an Apache child, neither yet old enough to know they should be enemies. They were gathering petals from Sarah's marigolds, mimicking their mother's herb collecting with innocent joy. The bundle's scent grew stronger in the warming air, each herb adding its voice to the medicine song. Shadow Wolf remembered his grandmother's teachings about how healing plants grew stronger together, how different medicines could combine to create something more powerful than each alone. "We begin small," Sarah said, reading his thoughts. "A bundle of herbs, a shared garden, children playing together. The rest will come with time, if we tend it carefully." Red Horse touched the herb bundle one last time before turning toward his waiting horse. "I will tell the council what I've seen here. Not all will listen, but some will remember older ways, better paths." As he rode out, the women continued their work, their voices rising in shared songs of gathering and gratitude. The herb bundle passed from hand to hand, growing richer with each addition, becoming something new yet ancient, like the peace they dared to nurture in this valley between worlds. The wedding blanket grew beneath many hands. Apache women worked, alongside settler wives, their fingers weaving together 2 worlds' worth of patterns. The wool came from Sarah's sheep, spun and dyed according to both peoples' traditions. Indigo from settler trade routes, red ochre from sacred Apache lands, yellow from shared desert plants. At the blanket's center, Morning Star's healing pattern emerged, the 2 spirits dancing, but now surrounded by new symbols that spoke of bridges built and boundaries crossed. Sarah's grandmother's rose pattern from Philadelphia met Apache. Lightning designs, Christian crosses intertwined with medicine wheels. Each woman who worked on it added her own prayers, her own hopes for the future, creating something never seen before in these lands. "Some say it is forbidden," Young Eagle muttered to Shadow Wolf as they watched the women work. Apache warrior and settler woman mixing blood and tradition. Shadow Wolf touched his grandmother's medicine pouch. "Many things were once forbidden that the old ones now say we must remember, like peace between peoples, like wisdom shared instead of hoarded." Black Horse approached, carrying the mended ceremonial drum. The bullet hole had been patched with a piece of the shield's leather, creating a new voice that somehow sang of both wound and healing. "In the ancient days," he said, "marriages between tribes were sacred things, ways of building bridges that war could not break." The women's songs filled the air as they worked, Apache melodies carrying English words, settler hymns with Apache phrases woven through them. Martinez's wife had taught them a Mexican wedding blessing that spoke of 2 rivers joining to form something stronger than either alone. Sarah sat among them, learning their ways as they learned hers. The first blanket she had woven for Shadow Wolf had been a gift of hope. This one was a declaration, not just of love between 2 people, but of possibility for 2 peoples. "The territory governor won't like it," Cooper said, having ridden out to witness the making. His eyes were softer now, remembering how Sarah's medicines had saved his son. Clayton neither. "They say mixing brings weakness. Look there." Shadow Wolf pointed to where children played, Apache and settler young ones learning each other's games, sharing each other's languages with the easy grace of the innocent. "Do you see weakness or strength growing like spring grass after rain?" The blanket's patterns seemed to shift in the afternoon light, telling different stories depending on how you looked at them. Like the peace they were building, it required viewing from multiple angles to see its full beauty. Red Horse rode in as sunset approached, leading a small group of tribal elders. They carried bundles wrapped in ceremonial leather, sacred things not seen since the last peacetime. "The council has spoken," he announced. "They remember how marriages once built bridges between peoples. They say perhaps it is time to remember other old ways as well." The eldest Apache woman stepped forward, her face lined with years of both sorrow and hope. From her bundle she drew forth a wedding basket so old its patterns spoke of times before divisions. "My grandmother's grandmother carried this," she said in Apache, then repeated it in careful English. "It was used when the people first made peace with the Navajo, through marriage and shared medicine." Sarah accepted the basket with proper reverence, recognizing its significance. Inside her cabin, her father's Bible lay open to where he had pressed flowers from both people's sacred plants between its pages. Tomorrow, both objects would play their part in a ceremony that would draw from all traditions, building something new from ancient foundations. The wedding blanket was nearly complete now, its size generous enough to wrap around 2 people with room to spare. Like the valley itself, it had become a place where differences met and transformed into harmony. Each pattern told a story. Here, the day Shadow Wolf first heard Sarah's song. There the night they shared the peace pipe. Here the morning the women first gathered herbs together. "When I was a boy," Black Horse said, running weathered fingers across the wool, "the old ones spoke of a time when our strongest medicine came from learning other people's ways. They said wisdom, like water, must flow freely to stay sweet." He looked at Shadow Wolf and Sarah. Perhaps they knew this time would come again. As dusk gathered, more people arrived. Apache families, settler households, Mexican traders. They brought food prepared in mixed traditions, medicines from shared gardens, songs that belonged to all and none. The wedding blanket passed from hand to hand, each person adding a prayer, a hope, a blessing for the future. Shadow Wolf and Sarah stood together as the first stars appeared, wrapped in the blanket's embrace. Around them, two peoples who had been enemies now shared meals and medicines, stories and songs. It wasn't perfect. There were still hard glances, careful distances, old wounds healing slowly, but it was a beginning. Like the blanket's interwoven patterns, they were creating something new. Not Apache, not settler, but a way of walking between worlds that made both stronger. The old storyteller's staff passed from hand to hand in the firelight, its surface worn smooth by generations of touching. Carved into the ancient wood were symbols that spoke of the time when hatred turned to healing, when two peoples found strength in unity rather than division. At its top, eagle feathers hung, one from Black Horse's Peace Council, one from Mourning. Star's medicine bundle, now joined by others added through the years. "Tell us again," the children begged, settler and Apache young ones sitting together in the evening circle. "Tell us of Shadow Wolf and Sarah, of how the medicine ways were saved." The elderly woman who held the staff smiled, touching its carvings. With knowing fingers, her face showed both bloodlines, Apache strength and settler grace, combined in features that had become increasingly common in the valley over the past 30 years. She was Sarah and Shadow Wolf's youngest granddaughter, keeper of both people's medicines, bearer of both people's stories. "It began with a song," she said in both languages as the story required. A warrior trained for war heard healing in a settler woman's voice. And because they were brave enough to choose a different path, wise enough to remember older ways, strong enough to stand against fear itself, they built this place, where medicine flows freely, where wisdom knows no boundaries, where children learn all their grandparents' songs. The staff's carvings caught the firelight, each one a chapter in the valley's transformation. Here was the broken arrow that marked Shadow Wolf's first choice for peace. There the medicine bowl that began, the sharing of healing ways, the shield that protected hope, the locket that carried memory, the blanket that wove traditions together. All had their place in the story and on the staff. "Some still call it Witch's Valley," the storyteller continued, "and others say it's haunted by peace spirits. But those who need healing find their way here, as they always have. Apache mothers teach settler daughters the old plant medicines. Settler doctors learn healing songs from tribal elders. And in the garden, your grandmother, Sarah, planted flowers from both worlds bloom side by side." She passed the staff to the next storyteller, as tradition demanded. The new voice took up the tale. "We are neither one people nor two, but something new. Born of courage, sustained by wisdom, growing stronger with each generation that chooses to walk the path of peace." Above the circle, stars wheeled in their ancient patterns, witnessing the story as they had witnessed its beginning. In the night wind, those who listened closely might still hear echoes of that first healing song, might still feel the presence of those who dared to imagine a different way. The storyteller's staff continued its journey around the fire, carrying medicine in its own way, medicine of memory, of hope, of wisdom passed down. And in its carvings, Shadow Wolf and Sarah's love story remained forever entwined with the larger tale of how hatred could transform into harmony, how walls could become bridges, how the strongest healing grew from the deepest wounds.